Hello there and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. This is the voice of Craig Telfer, and right now I am joined by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley of the Terrace get together? We're just going to have a really deeply weird marriage for 2 years, then get divorced, then one of us is going to get married to Nicolas Cage, of all people, but during that 24-month period, in amongst the weirdness, we might have the chance to talk a bit about some lower league Scottish football and make a podcast out of it.
That's a trio of very odd people. Presley, Jackson and Nicolas Cage.
I'm not sure about Lisa Marie Presley or Nicolas Cage. I know for a fact that Michael Jackson's where he was going to freeze himself at one point.
They're all odd, aren't they? I'm sure the three of them are quite unusual. If you were to dig into their backgrounds and what they're into, I'm sure they're all away from the norm. I don't know how else to describe them.
If your father had died shitting on a toilet, there's probably a wee bit of weirdness in you. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's just it. Three lost souls who just collided with one another in the mid-90s.
And then in terms of Nicolas Cage, he is just somebody who quite simply cannot stop spending money. Therefore, he has to essentially agree to every single script that comes his way.
Not all of them bad.
Most of them for about the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a damn shame, especially the news that's come out with him today. I think that his health problems are even worse. But Bruce Willis, I think, did you ever see any of his latter day films? He would make genuinely about 20 movies out the last 3 years of his career.
Yeah, but I suppose that was him literally trying to cash in, I suppose, last minute because he knew the health concerns were on the way. So I suppose he wanted to provide something for his family, whereas Nicolas Cage was busy spending £1 million on Superman comics and buying castles. That's
a fair point. Who knows? Maybe there might be some news about Nicolas Cage might be about to emerge. But you know what, Shaughan? It doesn't take away from the fact that Con Air's a really good film.
It's really good. Not because of Nicolas Cage, though. I didn't think
come on, he's great.
Oh, come on, put the bunny back in the box.
He's brilliant.
Shut up.
Oh no, he's great.
He's one of the worst actors of all time. He's been in good films, but he is a really bad actor.
I'm not having that. And everything about Con Air is just really, really camp, and he adds to it. I don't think he's a bad actor. It's just that he just adds to it. I mean, the whole spectacle of the movie is just. I think it's great. The last time I watched it, just it must have been about 11 o'clock at night, flicking through the channels, and I'd missed about the first 10 minutes of it. But genuine punch the air that yes, Con Air's on. Let's get it. Get it watched and completely transfixed.
That's the total here. It's like Con Air's like a good laugh, and Face Off is absolutely ridiculous. But the fact that he is in those films, he doesn't necessarily elevate them. It's just that everything around them is so exaggerated and so silly. He doesn't stick out. Whereas in terms of a lot of these films, he is so bad he sticks out, I suppose.
That's an Oscar winner you're talking about.
What was that for? Leaving Las Vegas?
Correct.
Which was a good film. I've only watched it once. It was a long time ago. I'd have to go back and revisit it. Maybe my opinion on Nicolas Cage would change.
Yeah, if you are a fan of Nicolas Cage, leave it in the comments, your favourite Nicolas Cage movie that Shaughan and I perhaps haven't seen yet, and we'll check it out and talk about it on next week's show, maybe.
It's funny you should bring it up because I was actually, so what day is this? We're recording this on Wednesday. I think it was maybe Monday. I was going to watch one of his films called The Surfer. And I was like, something, I've got a couple of hours before I go to bed. I'll maybe watch this. And I happened to, I goes, let's have a look to see what the reviews are like. And they all said it was awful. So I just passed it by.
Oh man, that's the sort of time where yes, the worse it gets, the better it is for me. I'd 100% watch that. But just before we move on, because we kind of lost the two main people we're supposed to be talking about, Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley. What's your favourite Michael Jackson song?
Favourite Michael Jackson song? I don't know. It's certainly some of his early. Oh, wait a minute. Thriller. Tremendous. Absolutely tremendous.
Thriller's good. I don't stop till you get enough. That's
also very good.
That's
also very good. What was the one, the song about the rat?
Ben.
Yeah, that's okay. Basically, all of his early stuff is good. I think when he starts to lose a run of himself, that's that I'd really struggled with almost everything from about maybe, I don't know, 89, 1990 onwards.
Yeah, you know, it's a really bad song. I mean, it's a sort of totem of my youth, Earth Song. Because it was number one for ages, and I used to. That just shows how much of a young mark I was. But you know, on Top of the Pops, when sometimes they would show the full video of the elephants coming back to life, I used to get really excited for that. But now looking back, it's just a man just going, "What about this? What about that?"
Do you remember? Was it Jarvis Cocker?
Yes,
ran on was
the Brit Awards.
Was he singing that song when he ran on stage? He wasn't flashing his bottom, but he kind of bent over, so I suppose the bottom of his trousers was facing the crowd, and he'd done a kind of opening motion with his hands. I don't know how to describe it.
I would describe it as the scene in Alien when the guy's down when the guy's looking for him in the tubes, and he looks one way, and then he looks and he goes, "Gee!" like that. That's what Jarvis Cocker was doing. He was doing an impression of the xenomorph killing Dallas, I think it is, in Alien.
Now, I think, again, I could be wrong, I appreciate we're going on a real tangent here. I think it was Bob Mortimer that defended Jarvis Cocker in court about that.
Really?
I believe so.
Wow, right. Let's get this podcast wrapped up as quickly as possible so I can get onto Wikipedia to read more about this. Shaughan and I are going to be looking at a game from the Championship, another one from League One, and final match from League Two. It's patented, this format, so don't get any ideas about stealing our intellectual property. And it's just a little side salad. We're going to be nibbling at some of the big talking points from Scottish football from the last 7 days. As Carly Simon said, nobody does it better. Baby, you're the best. She might have been referring to James Bond, but I think secretly she was referring to myself and Shaughan. Before we get going, Shaughan, everything okay?
Yeah. What about you?
I was playing badminton with Danny Lennon last Thursday, and it was another whitewash, I'm sorry to say.
It's funny, I may have got a message on Thursday night from a certain Mr. D. Denham to say that yes, it was another whitewash. However, he did say that one of the matches went quite close. I think you might have said 21-18, something like that.
Yes. Well, what had happened was AC/DC were performing at Murrayfield in Edinburgh, so the drive into Edinburgh was bad. Now, the David Lloyd gym where we both play is in Newhaven, which is near Easter Road. So Hibernian were playing at home that day, so it took me over 100 minutes to get from Glasgow to Edinburgh to play. And by that point in the car, I came out of the car, I was all elbows. I was all wretched with myself, so I wasn't in the best condition to be playing any racket sports. But nevertheless, I did give it a good go. But he's got I described his style of play. He plays badminton with the finesse of someone trying to drill a hole in a road. He can absolutely.
Doesn't sound like it's full of finesse.
Nah, he can't. But he's got a knack of getting the better of me in the third game, especially. I think it was 21-8. I just completely lost. I couldn't grip the racket properly at one point, and the lighting as well. The lighting is quite bad in the David Lloyd Court. So there's the two big reasons: roadworks, traffic, and just the lighting in the David Lloyd Court.
It sounds like Danny needs to come to one of your courts.
I'd love it. I've got the wife and kids. I need to stay. I need to do it quite locally.
Listen, Danny, if you really want to prove yourself as an elite badminton player, you need to go to FK5 or Glasgow, whatever Telfer is these days.
I don't like the idea of him texting you that I'm the way up the road with my tail between my legs, and straight away he's see you later. And then he's like, yes, Shaughan, fucked him over again. Brilliant. Your mate's pish. He's almost as bad at badminton as at podcasts.
He just told me the score and said that there was one close game. That's all he told me.
I like that one close game. There was one game that wasn't close. The rest of them were all quite moderate. I was giving it a good go. The law of averages say that I'm going to come back. I think at the start of the night he was like, "What does success look like to you?" And I said, "Wow, I'd like to win a game. That'd be great if I could manage that."
I like the thought of me because I remember my granddad's showed me how to play table tennis when I was maybe, I don't know, 9 or 10 or whatever. And to start with, I was getting leathered, absolutely leathered. So there's table tennis first to 21, can't remember. Let's say it is the first to 21. And it was every game was like 21-5, 21-6. But then, like, over the next kind of few months, it was getting closer and closer and closer. And suddenly it was getting to like 21-19, 21-18. And then he stopped playing me. He was like, "Oh, I've lost the net. We can't play anymore." I can imagine it getting to like, now I come to realise it is probably a lie. I can imagine Danny Lennon doing that to you. You get closer and closer, and he's like, "Oh, I can't play. I don't know. My wife's busy. Or I need to watch the kids or something."
Like the idea of your granddad insisting he's been buried with the net. Shaughan can never find out. Shaughan must never know what happened to the net. Why?
I know fine well he was just a big liar.
Aye, that's a shame. I mean, surely, like when you're away, you at least, or if you're playing away, at least let the Wayne win one to encourage them and to keep them engaged. It's like when you see people, like kids, or this is actually something I disagree with. You know, when you see kiddies taking in a beat the goalie, a penalty challenge.
Yes.
If that was the goalkeeper, I think David James, did he not do this quite recently? But just like the kiddies were taking penalties and saved them all. Absolutely no prisoners. If you want to score a penalty, you've got to make it hard and accurate or high and into the corner of the net. I will save it otherwise.
I suppose there's a professional pride when it comes to something like David James, I suppose.
Maybe that's it. Your grandfather had a professional pride, and just, you know, what do they say? Leave the table tennis before the table tennis leaves you. Now, that's far too long for us not to be talking about football, so we'll get into it, and we'll start with our first match. We'll focus in the Championship on Greenock Morton's 2-2 draw with Scott Brown's Ayr United. Eamon Brophy opened the scoring for the Tawn from the penalty spot, and although quick-fire goals in the second half from Kevin Holt and Nick McAllister put the honest men ahead, the Lone Wolf got his second of the match late on with a well-taken header to tie the contest. That's Morton's third successive draw. They're in sixth place with 3 points, but Ayr not really got going so far this season, on seventh with 2 points. And I think before we start talking about this match, I have to say we're thinking of Dougie Imrie and his family. Last week, as most people know, his baby girl Remy passed away after just 20 days. So can't even begin to imagine what he and his family are all going through. So wish them all the very best. That really goes out the same. I think it's important to say once more. Yeah. Shaughan, what did you make of Greenock Morton's 2-2 draw with Ayr United?
I thought for Morton it was probably a continuation of the season in general. Like they got through the League Cup group section. That was real. They thought they'd done really well there. In terms of the league games, I thought this was maybe the third game in a row where they'd managed to get a point, but maybe been second best on the day. Certainly in terms of watching their highlights against Dunfermline, I thought if it wasn't for a good performance from James Storer, they would have lost that one. I think as much as they were unlucky to concede a penalty against Partick Thistle, maybe over the piece, Thistle were the better side. And in terms of this one, again, as much as they kind of done well to dig in and come back from 2-1 down and get that point, I didn't think they were the best team on the day. I did think that the biggest positive from this one was the fact that Eamon Brophy managed to get that brace. Because I think he is a player, excuse me, we occasionally talk about players who maybe make a step down and we'll say, oh, that might be a good sign for that level. And we know it's a cliche, but it's funny, I'm not entirely sure if anybody thought that might be the case for Brophy. I know he stepped down this level last season with Falkirk and didn't make an impact, but he was injured. But he was injured, to be fair. But I did wonder if he would be any good for Morton. Not necessarily because he doesn't have the talent, but maybe injuries have diminished him, and he is a player who just isn't necessarily an accumulator of goals. So I wondered how he would get on. So I suppose that was a positive. In terms of Ayr, it was interesting in terms of the reaction from the Ayr fans, and maybe as a good indicator of what they think about Scott Brown at this moment in time. Because as much as they came back from a goal behind, as much as they were probably the better side over the piece, I think if Curtis Main and maybe managed to take a chance or two, they would have taken all 3 points. But I think afterwards, the talking point for Ayr fans was the substitutions that Scott Brown had made. And I do think that they kind of laid the loss of 2 points at the at the feet of Scott Brown, which maybe gives you an indicator of where they are at this moment in time.
Certainly, Scott Brown was impressed with the performance. He spoke after the match and said that he was happy with the goals. The set pieces was something that the team had been working on, so he was very happy to score 2 headers from corners. Thought that happy with Kevin Holt, happy with the strikers. Thought, like, again, just to jump on the point that you made, Curtis Main could have perhaps done a bit better in front of goal. I think there was 3 good chances that he passed up on. But Brown was happy with the performance, but the fans weren't. And I don't know if he might have come out and said that to, what's what I'm trying to explain here. He maybe came out and said that to, like, what's the word? Can it help me out here? He might have said that to try and basically, not gaslight's not the right word, but if the fans aren't happy with something, you can say, well, I was happy with it, and that's the most important thing.
Try and convince the fans about something that they're not entirely sure about.
Try to say, no, this was a good performance. It was as he said there, it was like an emotional day. I think the Morton players, not that they need much motivation, but they'd especially been keen to win this one for their manager.
So I'm not saying I agree with Scott Brown, but I suppose over the piece, based on what I saw and based on what I read, it did look like Ayr were the better team, and it did look like they deserved all 3 points, and on another day they probably would have done. However, it's, in terms of how Ayr United have started the season, that's not good enough, and it's not what... I don't think he could have necessarily come out and said anything that would have appeased Ayr United fans, but certainly what he did say didn't appease them, unsurprisingly, I suppose.
I think so. From you're coming into the new season with perhaps a couple of grumbles, particularly after the way that you succumbed to Partick Thistle in the playoff quarter final. Losing that late goal to a very depleted Partick Thistle side. Yeah, that will have really rankled. And I think that, and we're going to come on this when we talk about like a sort of a bonus section, but when there's a bit of a hangover from the following season, you really need to start well, because those grumbles very, very quickly can become quite loud. And I don't know if we're certainly not at a tipping point with Scott Brown, but I think we're at a stage where you're 7 points off St Johnstone already at the top of the table. I'm not saying that Ayr United were, I certainly didn't think they were a team who were going to win the division, but nevertheless, you expect them to be in the promotion hunt. Well, still a lot of football to be played. There are 33 games to go, but nevertheless, at this stage, you're miles behind the pace setters. That's the sort of thing that would worry. Are we seeing any evidence to suggest that the football's improved from last season? Not really. Players like Dom Thomas, played against Thistle at the weekend, the previous weekend in the League Cup, didn't have a particularly great game, but completely bombed out the starting 11 here and didn't come off the bench. And I think he's the sort of player that could make a big impact there. So I can perhaps understand why there's a bit of grumbling about Scott Brown and his management at Ayr United, because it's not like he's not been backed. I think he has. He's been well supported by the board, and I'm just not sure that we're really seeing the best from him and from the team of players that he's got out on the pitch.
Yeah, I suppose there's a few things that I am, and I suppose kind of supposing, if I'm putting my Ayr United supporter hat on, I'm trying to think, how would I feel about last season in terms of Scott Brown coming in? Was he the most, like, the fact that he has such a connection with Celtic, which a lot of lower league fans probably wouldn't be keen on, whether it's a huge affinity to Celtic or Rangers, and maybe isn't their number one appointment, I suppose. But regardless, I think as long as it goes well, that doesn't become a factor. But I think his post-match interviews last season, in terms of throwing players under the bus, certainly throwing goalkeepers under the bus, and then how last season finished, because I don't think, difficult to complain about how Ayr United went about the league business last season. But in terms of what you do remember as the playoffs, and it was quite feeble how they went about the playoffs. And you're right, they kind of needed to start the season positively. And to be fair, if you want to stick up for Brown, they have a lengthy injury list.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And presumably there's not a lot he can do about that. However, the the fact that somebody like Jake Hastie, for example, who, with the greatest will in the world, isn't the most popular of players, rightly or wrongly, with their United fans, but the fact that he's coming off the bench against Morton, but Dom Thomas can't, or isn't getting off the bench, rather, and I'll be honest, I think the latter is a far better player than Jake Hastie. So again, when you have a situation where Morton are grabbing a late equaliser, even if it's against the run of play, all these things are starting to add up and put more and more pressure on Brown.
I think as well that they were terrible against Partick Thistle last weekend as well, which really didn't help. And I think that's the teams that they've beaten. I mean, all part-time teams so far this season. They did 3 wins in the first games of the season, and since then they've picked up just draws and the loss of obviously to your boys in the second day of the season. But I think that would have been the worst thing last week. I mean, going to Partick Thistle in the knockout stage of the League Cup and ultimately losing to them, not the end of the world. I just think we only saw the highlights for it, but I mean, it looked like somebody who hated Ayr United was editing the highlights, because it's just chance after chance after chance after chance for Thistle. It looks like somebody's edited them to try and go out and embarrass Ayr. Obviously, that's not the case. But I think it's just we're just seeing it's a fairly compelling body of evidence, and it'll be a small one, that it's not going well. And injuries, that's the thing, every manager's got injuries to deal with. I do appreciate that if Ben Dempsey in the starting 11 makes Ayr United better, but I just think about Scott Brown. And just interesting, just the point that you made there about his connection with Celtic is I don't know if this is me, but I would find someone like Scott Brown more appealing than somebody like Barry Ferguson, for instance.
Yeah. Yes,
you don't have to combine that, but just two captains for both sides of that.
So I know what you mean, but I would say at this moment in time, the only reason you would have Brown, so let's say when Brown was appointed Ayr United manager, I think Ayr fans would be okay with that, because they weren't entirely sure about his time with Fleetwood, which seemed very up and down, but admittedly Fleetwood seemed like a basket case, whereas Barry Ferguson had a fairly poor record in the clubs they'd already been with. But again, I suppose you have a situation where a captain of Celtic, a captain of Rangers, I don't think that necessarily does you any good in the eyes of the fan base if you become a manager of that side, in my opinion anyway.
So some fans think like buses of Celtic and Rangers fans will start suddenly appearing so they can get a glimpse of someone that used to play for them as he stands in the dugout at a dismal ground somewhere. It's not the case. Remember they said that about the idea of B teams? That they didn't. We're going to get a TV deal for the Lowland League, and the crowds are going to increase tenfold. Didn't happen. Sorry, we're losing the run of ourselves there. Excuse me, but what about for Morton? Obviously, an emotional day, and I think in the circumstances to dig out a point after going 2-1 down late on, that's quite satisfying. Unbeaten in the league as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for them. I still haven't seen anything from them so far that I didn't necessarily expect. As in, they'll be okay. They have a bit about them. They can dig in. I think they can probably, defensively, they're sound. I think they've got decent defensive players. I kind of worry about them in the middle of the park, and I do think that adding Eamon Brophy might give them enough if he can continue to do things like this. In terms of, I worried about Morton not having enough going forward and being bottom 4, but being bottom 4 in terms of quite close to the bottom 2. But maybe I still don't see them being any higher than 7th or 6th. But now that I've seen them, I still don't think they'll get in bothered in kind of 10th or 9th.
Yeah, we know what's going to happen with Greenock Morton. They've got a bit of a tricky start to the season. A third, the middle third, you go like, my goodness, is this the season where Morton gatecrash the top 4 and then really fall away in the final 11 matches or so and think, no, they're going to finish 6 or 7. That's fine. I do think Eamon Brophy's a player I like. Obviously, a one-time Scotland international as well, lest we forget, and who loans his name to the greatest trinket ever created in Scottish football, the Eamon Brophy Lone Wolf Trophy. And I think in terms of the midfield, I think what Eamon Brophy's best quality is just that he's incredibly hard-working and incredibly selfless for the team. And I think that he's the kind of player that managers would love to have. Yeah, there's issues with his shooting, and he can be a bit selfish at times. Sometimes his decision making can let him down. Basically, somebody who wants to shoot from anywhere. But like, penalty was well taken, albeit Mitchell was a bit. I think it was very precise. That's what you say about the penalty. Very precise. And his goal was the second goal, the equaliser, was really, really well taken. Yeah. But I think when he signed for Morton, rather than thinking, I don't think I'm not sure how he'll go, I think that's actually a pretty good piece of business. I think that just at Ross County fell out of favour there under Don Cowie, and at Falkirk, it must be so difficult if you're a player there that you go to a new club, you're hoping for a new lease of life, and Falkirk were just in such a good place at the period he was there last season, and he just couldn't really play a part in it. I think that he'll probably be a Sporkle quiz, try to name all the Falkirk players that won the championship with him, and you'll be like, oh, who was that? Oh, Eamon Brophy. So it was. But it was good to see him scoring again, and good to see him crack out the Lone Wolf. Looks a bit like in fact, I think it is the exact same as, NWO's Too Sweet taunt.
So you won't be surprised to know that I am, although I'm aware of his celebration, I'm not aware of the wrestling comparison. No, sorry.
Listen, I'm sure Scott Hall was looking down at him, and Hulk Hogan was definitely looking up at him, thinking that fair play, it's good to see you back in business. And another observation I had, right, and this is I can't possibly explain it. It's not to do with football, but see Nathan Shaw, put the cross in for the equaliser. He looks like a priest from Father Ted.
I think he's a spitting image of Greg Spence, but with like more hair, ultimately.
Nah, he looks like a hapless young priest who's just out the seminary and gets into some sort of scrape that Ted's got to pull him out from. That's what he looks like to me. It's weird, just like seeing his that's terrible audio, but that's me trying to do an impression of Nathan Shaw smiling.
There is nobody else. I don't think there's anybody else in 2025 that has hair like Nathan Shaw. It's like something from the Victorian era, after the taking off a bonnet. That is what I would expect hair to be like.
I can just imagine a photograph of him wearing in Kelvin Grove Museum wearing just a giant white shirt. Like with a caption like Victorian gentlemen in nightgowns, pictured 1862. The other observation I had, sorry, because I've not the Kevin Holt's equaliser, I thought it was like something from a Rube Goldberg machine. When so many things need to happen for it to actually ultimately come up. I mean, when you see corner kicks, normally you see corner kicks, so two things happen. One, it's a ball into the box and there's a header. Or there's a deep cross in and it gets headed back in and someone gets shot. There was three things that happened here. Deep cross comes in, then it gets sort of hooked into the 6-yard box, and then there's Kevin Holt there to head home. So it was a lot of moving parts. And for the Nick McAllister's goal, don't know if you noticed this in the highlights, he seemed to be eyeballing a child who was in the terracing behind the goals. Did you see it?
I never noticed that. No, I'll have to go back and revisit.
Go back and watch him. I thought he'd do the Spider-Man celebration, after his recent hijinks, but no, he just kind of looked at a kiddie quite menacingly.
It's funny in terms of that goal from the corner. There is another game that we're going to talk about on this podcast where I thought the goal from the corner was very, very similar. But if anything, there was actually an additional stage compared to the Ayr United one. But we will get to it later.
Excellent. I'll look forward to that. I'm trying to think what game it is. Don't spoil it for me, and don't spoil it for our listeners. But yeah, good draw. I think perhaps better for Morton than it is Ayr United. I think that it was a result that Scott Brown could have really done with. I think he had a bit of gnashing of the teeth when Brophy got that equaliser.
Yeah, and I think they've got 2 games cancelled coming up. So they might have a game cancelled and then a game against Queen's Park and another game cancelled. I would have to go back and revisit it. But maybe, I was thinking if maybe getting a couple of games cancelled gives them an opportunity to get some players back. Like get some of their injured players back. However, if I think there might be one game in between. I suppose the issue would be if they lose that one, then then pressure potentially builds rather than it being a good thing to get some time off.
You're right. There's a game on Saturday, the 6th September against Dunfermline. That's been postponed, in a game sort of later on that month against Partick Thistle. That's been postponed.
Right, okay.
However, they've got Queen's Park at the weekend.
I will still say that they will win this one.
Okay, and St Johnstone versus Greenock Morton.
Hard to see past it. As much as Morton have done reasonably well this season, it's very, very difficult to see past a St Johnstone win here.
Yeah, watch the highlights of their game against Arbroath, and they just look really, really good.
Yeah,
I know there's different levels and different aspirations between what St Johnstone want to do this season, what Arbroath want to do, but St Johnstone they're absolutely purring at the moment, and very difficult to see past them for this fixture and maybe for the league title, and that leads us nicely on to a piece of bonus content, because Don Cowie has left Ross County. On Sunday it was announced he was stepping down as manager by mutual consent. They lost to Partick Thistle the previous day, going down 3-1 at home, and it's capped a really miserable start to the season. Just 1 point from 3 matches, and they're 8 points from St Johnstone at the top of the table. And I don't know about you, Shaughan, I'm going back to what we spoke about in the preview podcast. Felt like a mistake keeping him on. Because he would have had to come into this season. There was absolutely no margin whatsoever for error. And then you have a pretty mediocre League Cup campaign when you're up against it. You don't beat Stranraer, for instance. You lose that match on penalties. Or certainly you don't beat Stranraer. You take part. I can't quite remember exactly how that match came up. And then your big game against St Johnstone, you're second best in that match, and then you get thumped by Thistle. It's pretty miserable. And John Robertson, as a lot of people might have expected when he was announced as the assistant manager, he's taken over the club on an interim basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think we maybe even mentioned it in the summer, but this feels like the most predictable scenario in the SPFL this season in terms of Don Cowie being moved on and John Robertson taking his position. Whether it's on an interim basis, presumably it will be, unless he makes a success of it, and then he will probably be given it the reins full time. I suppose it's quite interesting. I wonder if I was one of the Ross County coaches, because it was quite an unusual scenario where Don Cowie was kept on, but all of his coaching team was dismissed,
including his brother, I think.
Yeah, like they might be saying, well, maybe you should have kept us on and got rid of my hopeless brother. I don't know. It's funny. I was having a look at John Robertson's managerial CV. I suppose it's not quite as impressive as I thought it was off the top of my head. For some reason, I thought he had a wee bit more success in there. Regardless, I think he will bring stability. I think he will, at the very least, win them games and keep them competitive. But I do think it's madness to have kept Don Cowie on in the first place. Like that playoff game against Livingston was feeble. I thought at that point he might have been moved on. Then to give him all of the summer, to give him whatever it is, 95% of the transfer window, and then to move him on. I suppose you could argue it's admirable from McGregor to give somebody that length of time, but ultimately, I honestly don't think there was anybody that thought this was going to work out.
Nah.
And if that's the case, the earlier you get rid of them, the better. So sticking with them has not worked out whatsoever.
It reminded me, and obviously Cowie's got a connection with the club, so maybe people are a bit more sympathetic with him for that. Reminded me of Arbroath last season, starting the campaign under Jim McIntyre, having, I think it was 10 consecutive defeats to finish up last season. And at that point you think, like, listen, it's not working. Thank you very much for your service. We're going to go with something different for the division. But then you have a false start and you've got to correct it with David Gold and Colin Hamilton coming in. Now, ultimately, that proved to be very successful with the pair of them going on to win the division. But there was no one in the different levels, compared to like last season's League One to this season's Championship. No one in the same par as St Johnstone. It just feels like you've wasted months. That's what it feels like. You've wasted months. And they're going, John Robertson might correct the course. Somebody else might come in and correct the course. But it just feels like if you're going to go up, you're going to have to go up via the playoffs. I mean, we're only 3 games in, so a lot can happen. But at the moment, it just feels very difficult to see anyone usurping St Johnstone at the top of the table, given how well they started.
Yeah, I agree. That was actually a really good comparison. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. There was nobody in League One last season that could have went on such a tear as it feels like St Johnstone can this time around. But as we saw last season, you don't have to win this league to get promoted. If there's a couple of duffers in the division above, like Livingston, got promoted despite finishing second. So winning the league isn't the be all and end all. But regardless, even just the thought of Ross County in this predicament in terms of them getting promoted, whether it's through the playoffs or winning the league, feels like a long way away.
I wonder, and this is maybe one for our listeners as well, can you think of a manager who has come into a season where he's been written off, who has had a very bad end to one campaign, been written off, come into a new campaign and actually done well for a team?
Oh, off the top of my head, no. I'm sure there has been, but off the top of my head, no.
Oh, I think I'm trying to think when Gary Naismith was the manager of East Fife, they were relegated one season and then he won the division with them the next year. Mm-hmm. So that's one example, but you're going back to
it's rare.
It's rare that it happens. Maybe David Martindale, relegated last season, comes back up the following year.
He had loads of credit in the bank.
Yeah, aye. But do let us know if you can think of examples. Shaughan and I might discuss them in next week's show. But please, we need to get several in. If one person gets in touch, we won't bother. So please send us in several different examples and Shaughan and I will appraise them. And Shaughan, just while we're talking about managerial changes, Danny Lennon, earlier today on Wednesday, has been appointed the new manager at Airdrieonians. He had previously managed the team on an interim basis in 2016 and he comes in to replace Rhys McCabe, who had departed a week and a bit ago. Lennon, of course, best known for his time at St Mirren, where he won the League Cup in 2013 and was last involved in frontline management with Clyde, where he departed them about 3 years ago. What do you make of this appointment?
Did not see this coming at all. I mean, the fact that there was rumours that Chris Doolan was at the game on Saturday, I presumed that he was going to be a shoo-in for this position. Turns out that's not the case at all. There was rumours yesterday that Lennon might be in the equation. I presumed that was somebody who's making stuff up. Did not see this coming at all. I'm not entirely sure that it will be quite as poor as what Airdrie fans seem to be believing.
Oh, because I think that it will be. The reaction, it's uniformly negative. Certainly if you go by social media, go by the message boards, it's uniformly negative. And the only comparison, or certainly a recent comparison I can think of, Stephen Presley going in at Dundee, where the kindest thing people have said was, well, give him a chance.
But you can understand why. I mean, like the last time he had a full-time position was St Mirren, which was a long time ago. Since then he was pretty poor at Alloa. Yes, he got Clyde promoted from the 4th tier and kept them up in the 3rd tier, but I suppose he had the kind of cheat code, I suppose, of David Goodwillie landing on his lap. So you can understand why. You can understand why Airdrie fans are hesitant about the appointment, I suppose.
I think the only time he's flopped in management, that he really flopped, was at Alloa.
Yeah.
I think that's the only time you can say. If you look at the clubs that he's been at, where he was at Cowdenbeath, brilliant at Cowdenbeath. St Mirren, won St Mirren, I think, the first ever League Cup in their history in 2013. And maybe the ending there was a bit murky. There was talk of him getting stiffed out by like Tommy Craig and all that, and bad decisions at boardroom level. Alloa didn't work out for him. Clyde, a broad success. I mean, the calibre of football they were playing, the season they got promoted, I think that was at 17-18.
Maybe.
The season they got promoted, they were really, really good. You know, you've got to say, David Goodwillie, the only reason he's playing for Clyde, found guilty of rape in a civil court, otherwise he'd be elsewhere. But you had an excellent striker in Goodwillie, and you'd have really, really good balance in midfield. I think it was like John Rankin, Holden, Ray Grant, Chris McStay. Really, really good to watch, that Clyde team. Really, really good to watch. But
it did feel like that team got weaker and weaker and weaker every season. It feels like if he is, and maybe this won't be the case at Airdrie, although they're no longer have that link up with Concilium. I think if he's the man that is in charge of bringing players in, then and even Alloa as well, going as far back as Alloa, it feels like there is evidence that he isn't necessarily the man to rebuild a squad, which it feels like Airdrie, okay, they don't need to rebuild the squad, feels like they still need additions.
If I'm going to compare him to someone, I compare him to Michael Jackson in the documentary Living with Michael, where he's going through the shop in Las Vegas and going, these, we got these, yoo-hoo. I think that was a big criticism of his time at Clyde, certainly from the comments you read from supporters. It was that the football was excellent, but then when he actually had to start building a squad or lost players, just wasn't able to replace him with the right profile. But Charlie Telfer's coming back, who should be a good signing for them. He was very good at the last time he was there.
That feels like an upgrade on anybody else they have in the middle of the park. So yes, right away, immediately, that team gets better. So fair play. That's a good signing.
Hopefully, Danny has a number of some strikers as well. Is that something they're needing?
I think they literally have none. So yes, from an Airdrie perspective, fingers crossed he is aware of some.
Who's that boy Jeff Mitchell that Alloa had? The absolutely massive guy. Maybe he's still got his number. Give him a bell.
I can't remember what game it must have been. An Alloa Wraith Rovers game that I watched them in the flesh. Incredible. It must have been about 6'5". Couldn't jump, couldn't run, couldn't play football. It was great to watch.
Just sticking between the posts, get into his feet. That's the only thing you can do. I got to say though, Danny Lennon, were you in the episode review from the Terrace when he was a guest?
I thought he was good company.
I think that regardless of what you think of Danny Lennon as a manager, the general consensus is he is a lovely, lovely guy. Great company. I would describe like just a really infectious personality. You know, he's just like super, super enthusiastic. And I'd say this, that when he was there, like he really lit the room up. I know that's the thing, but he comes in, he looked good with sort of like long hair, and he was really immaculately dressed, and I think he smelled quite good. And just coming in, it's like, it's class getting to hang out with Danny Lennon, and hopefully that's that personality of his that can rub off on the players and maybe give them a bit of a bump. But big game for them at the weekend, away to Arbroath.
Just before we get to Airdrie versus Arbroath, you're right. I thought it was good company, but on that, if Gary Naismith, let's say Gary Naismith had left Stennismuir last week, would you have liked Danny Lennon to be the next Stennismuir manager?
Well, it's immaterial, really, isn't it? That's not important. You know something? What I would say is that when Stephen Swift left Stennismuir, Lennon was one of actually fancied Lennon or Paul Hartley to take over. Naismith was a bit of not so much a left field, but slightly someone I didn't expect to come in. And obviously, I'm absolutely delighted with Stennismuir's direction of travel. So there's no point in getting bogged down in what ifs and all that, because that's a bit silly. But Arbroath Airdrie, Shaughan, at the weekend.
I've been quite impressed with Arbroath, and I'm not entirely sure that new manager bounce is a real thing. But I'll go for Arbroath to win, actually.
Yeah, I think despite the fact that they were well beaten at the weekend by St Johnstone, as we said there, I think there was quite a spirited performance. All the same, there's enough to be. You know, it's one of those games where you go away to like a bigger team and you get turned over, and you say, "Yeah, we lost, but if we can replicate what we were doing there against the teams more our level, we've got ourselves a chance." So we'll see about that. But good luck to Danny Lennon. Good luck to Airdrieonians. We will turn our attention to League One and we'll head to Angus, where Montrose were beaten 2-0 by Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Alfie Bavidge opened the scoring early on, and Callum MacLeod grabbed the second after 33 minutes. Caley Thistle now in 7th place with 4 points, while Montrose are in 9th with just 1 point from their 4 matches. Shaughan McGuigan, tell me about this one.
This just felt very, very comfortable. It was probably a good summary of where both clubs are at this moment in time. I think Blair Lions missed a chance before before Inverness took the lead, but after that, it was all very, very straightforward. Especially the first half, like it could have been more than God, Inverness could have had a bigger lead than the one that they held. I know Montrose seemed to come back into it in the second period. But I remember I think it was a preview pod, spoke about the fact that there was a suggestion, and maybe a St Johnstone fan had said online, that ultimately Inverness were a championship team in League One. And I disagreed. Not because I didn't think Inverness wouldn't win the division, because I thought they had a good chance. But in terms of their strength, in terms of that starting 11, were they a championship team? Didn't think they were in any shape, way, or form. And I still think that's to a degree that's where we are. But I do think that Alfie Bavidge just kind of elevates that Inverness squad. And I thought the two of them, and Bavidge and Alfie Stewart, they were excellent on Saturday against Montrose. And you would imagine that that's a kind of pairing that will just do damage to anybody in that league.
I thought Stewart had a great game in particular. I think the highlights, every good thing in that first half, it's through him, a lot of the good stuff. I mean, the opening goal, and to jump back in before talking about the opening goal, Blair Lyons is like a sort of head and hands moment, because I wasn't quite sure who put the ball over, but all he just needs is to connect with it. And just direct it, because that's going to go in. Monroe, the ball's gone past Monroe. There's so much of the goal to aim at, and for it to fluff it, that must sound about 2 or 3 minutes into the game, it could have completely changed the direction of the match. But the opening goal's brilliant. It really nicely worked in the middle of the park there, and just Stewart's pass. I mean, you could probably maybe say that. Yeah, it's easy enough for a player to pick out passes when no one closes him down or forces him to make space for himself or whatever. But it's a great pass from Stewart. But Bavidge's run is brilliant. And again, you could maybe say Montrose's defending's poor, because Kieran Freeman just doesn't seem to have a clue. It's like the bit in Jurassic Park where he's explaining how the velociraptors work. So, you've got your eye on one of them, and all of a sudden, the ones that you haven't noticed have come there. I think that's what Kieran Freeman gets. He's caught ball watching. But then he allows Bavidge's run, just the pace is so good. I think he nips between him and Craig Smith. Yeah. And it's a really, really nice finish as well. And you can see Smith, he's sort of doing this like why sort of gesture. Again, terrible audio, but imagine a lower league Italian manager really frustrated at the referee. He's sort of like he's pinching his thumbs into his fingers. He's like, why did you let him run off you like that? And then Stewart, I mean, it's his. I think he plays later on in the game. It's his corner that leads to the goal. There's another moment in the match he plays a really good ball over for David Wotherspoon to have a shot, forces Cammy Gill into a good save. So there's a lot to like about them, and the two Alfies. I don't know if that's what they're called around Cali Thistle. Oh, where you go? I'm off to see the two Alfies. Oh, what the two Alfies up to? Sound like sort of Cockney gangsters from the 60s.
I mean, you would only call them that if they stayed in the same house.
Or they're just really good friends. I'm going to see the two Alfies. Oh, the bloody two Alfies. But yeah, I mean, two young guys that are quite bright. And I think that with Bavidge coming in there, we all knew that a striker was a priority for Cali Thistle. And I think it was very much all eggs. We'd said that in the preview show, all eggs in one basket. It was just a matter of time. And I think they are delighted to have gotten back, and he's made a strong contribution there with his performance here.
Yeah, I thought the only thing that would deny them getting promotion, maybe winning the league, but certainly getting promotion would be, I'm not entirely sure about goalkeeper in terms of Ross Monroe. I don't think they have any depth there. I don't know who the backup is, but I certainly don't have anybody who is better than Ross Monroe, and I'm not entirely sold on him. And then if they were going to have Billy Mackay leading the line all season, then that concerned me. However, the fact they managed to bring Bavidge in, I think that will give them enough now in terms of potentially dominating opponents, as you saw on Saturday, that even if Ross Monroe doesn't have the greatest of games, or is at fault for a goal every now and again, or maybe drops a cross every now and again, I think they'll get away with it because they can dominate opponents so easily.
Yeah, I still think Mackay's a player with a lot to offer. I mean, a really good chance in this game. It was really good. Again, going to compare him to a Velociraptor from Jurassic Park, but I think Craig Smith gets the ball and just dawdles on it or takes a bad touch, and then Mackay's right on top of him, shoots past the post. Probably should have scored in that.
But that's not the issue with Mackay. The issue with Mackay isn't getting into those chances or.
I was just about to say that. I was
Sorry.
literally just about. No. But you're right. It's not about that. I think that it's just a lack of mobility, inability to stretch games, and that's something that Babbage certainly does have. Is that ability, and it's I think that Mackay is, just because he's at that stage in his career, he just have to be a bit more conservative with what you do and where you make your runs. Whereas that's not really an issue for Babbage. He can just sprint around like a puppy for 90 minutes. But I think what you said there, that seems to be the general consensus of this match, was that it was a very, very dominant first half performance from Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Both managers said that. It was after the interval, the state of the game's changed a bit. I know they Montrose brought on Michael Tidser. They gave them a bit more poise and a bit more control in the middle of the park. And Michael Tidser's a great player. I think that's actually a really, really good signing for Montrose. It doesn't really count for much if you're still 2 down. You know, if going by the highlights, there wasn't really, Montrose didn't really carve open any chances. Might have seen a lot of the ball and might have had a bit more control. But that's all very well, having control. But if you're chasing the game and you've got to try and find 2 goals against a pretty stingy side, that's a difficult thing to do. And I think it's quite a straightforward win at the end of the day for Cali.
Yeah, and I think certainly second half Inverness were like, right, well, what can you do? And ultimately Montrose couldn't do very much. And it feels like there's just a bit of a funk about them at the moment. They had, even if everybody was fit in that squad, it feels like it's maybe one of the lesser lights of League One now. And the fact you have Craig Whiten retired before this game in the middle of last week, and then I think Kerr Waddle kind of pulled up injured in the warm-up. I think he was supposed to start, and it just feels like they're already running a very, very tight ship, and they're not getting the breaks, and it really feels like they need bodies in at this moment in time.
Yeah. I was really sorry to see Craig Whiten leave the club. I mean, my 2 immediate thoughts are, one, that's shite because he's only 28, and I think that he would have had a lot to offer Montrose. It's just a damn shame that, I mean, reading the statement that went out on their social media post, good to see them actually play it straight for a change in social media and try to chase engagement. So that was there's a third thing to be impressed about. What Stuart Petrie said in his post-match interview, was like, I wouldn't say gushing, but just really, really full of praise for Craig Whiten as a player and as a person and a professional. So it's just a shame that you don't have that, because I think that Whiten, it was a bit of a gamble. I think there had been talk during the summer, or certainly even prior to his making his move to Montrose and a permanent, that he was going to join like the Midlands League, go to sign for like Dundee North End, where it's a far less intense, or he was going to retire altogether. And he's given it a go and it's not worked. But if you're uncomfortable and you can't enjoy spending time with your family, then that's shite, and you need to then you do need to think of what's best.
Yeah, I mean, you it sounded like, in terms of him training full time, he was just in pain constantly, and that dropping down to part-time level might mean that he is, I don't know, can play with his kids and not be in pain. But it sounded like that wasn't giving him any respite whatsoever.
It was the other thing as well. So that was my first thought was for Craig Whiten, and my second thought was saying, what are Montrose going to do?
Yeah.
Where's the goals coming from? I thought Craig Whiten was a right good signing for them, because just he's quality. I mean, he's quality. You don't play for that long in the top flight. You don't get a transfer to. I would say you don't get a transfer to Hearts unless you're good. David Vanacek. Would David Vanacek cut it in Montrose? I don't think he would. But you know what I mean? There's the money's been spent on him, and I think there's been a lot of promise. Everyone knows that Craig Whiten's a good player, especially when he was breaking through at Dundee. He's got a lot to offer. I remember seeing him in a game against Steny the tail end of last season. His back to goal play was excellent. Just, you could see anytime there's like a ball over, always looking, see where the defender's going, and if you could sort of just like sprint in behind them or just try and like back into them, really good. And it just allowed the bringing the ball into him, just allowed the whole team to get up, and he could have been a real strong focal point for it. And just at this stage, I know Petrie said that, it's good that he told us when there's still time to get a player in. Who? I can't think of anyone.
I don't think it's going to. It won't necessarily. Well, he's certainly not a striker. But I think there was street talk that Lewis Gibson was at the game last night in
right.
in the Challenge Cup. So I think potentially there is a scenario there where he joins them
How come
on loan.
I mean, if that is the case, how come it's not worked out for him at the Rovers? I thought that'd be a right good signing for you guys.
I think maybe a kind of mishmash of reasons. I suppose he was signed by the third last manager or the second last. Like, he was signed by Ian Murray. Then Coach Collins came in. Now it's Barry Robson. Both Collins and Robson doesn't really play with wingers. I did, in fairness, I did think he started last season quite well. Set up a goal against Stranraer, won a penalty against Partick in a league game, done really well in a right wing back position against Ayr in the Challenge Cup. Then he kind of frittered away. I think in terms of him coming on for cameos, he didn't do very much. And then by the end of the season, we were essentially playing a formation that maybe didn't really suit him. And even if you wanted to bring somebody on, how do you bring him on? Because we're still not really playing with wingers. So I think certain circumstances, whether his face didn't fit when it comes to Barry Robson, I don't really know. But I certainly liked him, and I thought he deserved more opportunities last season. And I know, as far as I'm aware, he was supposed to go out on loan about January last season. Right. And I really wish he had, because he didn't play he maybe played a couple of games in January for Wraith. Maybe that's why he didn't, because we were desperate at the time. But then I don't know if he played at all any minutes, maybe from February onwards. So maybe if he went to Montrose or whoever was after him last January and he played 15, 20 games, maybe he would have come back at the start of this season. It would have been in a better frame of mind or whatever. But he's played friendlies, he's got some bits and bobs here and there. But even though the Wraith squad is wafer thin and arguably has fewer players than how it ended last season, off the top of my head,
if you still can't get in,
it feels like he's almost lower down the pecking order somehow.
You see that when it's always bad. Like, say if you're a winger, for instance, and the manager's turning his bench and he puts central midfielders on or plays strikers in that position, it's just like, this isn't happening. Let's go and find football elsewhere. But I suppose Tidson's a good signing. Yep, I think that's a really, really good piece of business by Petrie to get him in, because I've said it before in this podcast, massive fan of his. So I like watching him play football. You can't get the ball off him when he's got it. And I just think to give you that ballast in the middle of the park, so important. And by having him in there, the ability to keep the ball will keep Montrose on the front foot. Maybe if you don't necessarily have like the Craig Whiting up front to play with the back to goal play to carry the team at the park, you certainly won't lose it with Tidser in there. And even though he's 35, I think it is at the moment, really good signing. And once he's up to speed, and he should be, I think he's going to go in for the weekend's game against Peterhead. Then he'll be a good sign. So that's something for Petrie to be a bit more optimistic about. But it just feels like not a great start. 1 point out of the 4, difficult start to the season. I suppose that point was against Cove Rangers when you had 10 men for 70 minutes. So
Cove Rangers aren't very good though.
Yeah, Cove Rangers aren't very good. But still, to play, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're playing against 10 men playing with 10 men for 70 minutes, that's good to dig out a point.
I suppose what they've always had in the past is maybe other players chipping in with a lot of goals, even if they aren't strikers, whether that's been Graham Webster or Blair Lyons, for example. So if they can chip in, if Lewis Gibson could come in and make an impact, from the bits and bobs I've seen of Ewan Loudon, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be prolific, but I do think there is something there. So it's not, I don't think you need to be completely kind of downbeat, but I do think it'll be, I don't see him finishing top 4, put it that way.
I think when you signing strikers from Brecon City is the equivalent of signing strikers from Holland. You just, every 7 goals scored at Brecon City is equivalent to like 1 League 1 or League 2 goal.
Dog years.
I'd like dog ears. Let's say, like the other observation I had from this, Scott Kelleher's post-match interview, it looked like he was being interviewed on a ship. He just kept on sort of swaying from side to side, like he was out at sea.
I did notice that. Yes, correct.
Aye, but I think she's quite right to be quite happy with how the season started. I know that they lost against Stennismuir the previous week, but I think probably like 4 times out of 5, that's a game they would have won. They'd had a number of chances in the first half, especially just combination of like good goalkeeping from Darren Jamieson and bad finishing prevented them from winning that match. But on the whole, very positive beginning to the campaign, performance-wise and generally results-wise. And I think it's a matter of time before they ascend to the top of the table.
Yeah, I think so. I thought what could hamper them is A, the points deduction, and B, the other full-time teams that were in there. Really wasn't sure about Cove, and I presumed that something disastrous would happen to Hamilton, and maybe Queen of South could stop them. Feels like Queen of South are similar to last season, but not quite as poor. But I don't see anybody putting anything together that will eventually stop Inverness.
Just on Queen of the South, so they drew 0-0 with Stennismuir in the weekend there, and Grinning Pete and his players went over to the terracing to clap them at the end. As he was walking back from clapping the fans to the centre circle, I think somebody shouted like, "Fucking hurry up, Pete! Sandra's waiting for you."
Maybe it was Sandra's husband. Just want to get back up the road.
I watched this, but it's remarkable how a man can answer a question and then just be asked the same question slightly differently. Remarkable stuff. But up next, very, very interesting game. This Inverness Caledonian Thistle against the league leaders, unbeaten. In fact, 3 back-to-back wins. Alloa Athletic.
Regardless of how well Alloa have started the season, and they've been really impressive, I think that Inverness will have too much for them. Inverness win.
You see, and Montrose Peterhead.
Oh, if Gibson is brought on board, then I think that Montrose will give them a game, but I'll still go for a draw.
I just before we move on, I mean, the Links Park surface, it looked like, if you didn't know any better, you would think that looks like quite a badly maintained grass pitch. It was very sort of like discoloured on one part of the ground.
I think somebody said on Pine Bother, I'm sure I read this on maybe Sunday or Saturday, that somebody put a load of cork down on it and it just hadn't bedded down correctly. I mean, I don't know how to maintain plastic pitches, but if that's what the experts do, put cork on it, then who am I to disagree?
That sounds like an old wives' tale. It's like we've run out of rubber pellets. I don't want to get some cork down there. Somebody sent off to odd bins, all this wine being decanted, and then the cork's just mashed up and chucked on the ground. Cork, right, there we go.
It's presumably cheaper.
If anyone knows exactly what happened to the Montrose pitch, again, do get in touch with us. I don't like, Shaughan and I are quite ignorant people, so we do need somebody to come along and explain exactly what happened. Are you a greenkeeper? Do let us know. Just one final thing before we move on, Shaughan, into League Two. We obviously have to talk a little bit about Stennismuir, and on Tuesday night they were playing against Annan Athletic in the KDM Trophy. Nicky Jamieson opened the scoring in that match with a really good effort from just inside the penalty box and played 90 minutes. First 90 minutes in a long, long time. And I've got to say, man, it is absolutely amazing to see the big man back in action. Missed a lot of football virtually all of last season, played the first 2 matches in the League Cup before succumbing to injury against Ayr United. Long road back in terms of actually getting to the root of the problem, going through surgery, the recovery, the rehabilitation. What was a bit of a setback in the summer, but now the big man's back in business and is able to actually make a contribution for the first team, and I think everyone at the club is absolutely delighted for him.
I can imagine how excited you have to see him back, and yes, it's a cliche. It must feel like a new signing.
Yeah, it does. It does. He's a lovely big guy as well. You know, there's something really, just some really again, like just a good guy to be around, and he's well liked at the club, and he's made a good effort with the fans. You know, a lot of the time he'll come into the wee bar after games and just chat to folk. You're in there for like 2 minutes and up the road, and
it just creates a lot of good sense of esteem in that. And his dad comes to the games, and his dad's a really nice guy as well. So it'll be great. However, he's got to work hard to get in front of Archie Graham, young boy. No, you're laughing, but Archie Graham's a young boy that came in from Queen's Park, who has the jersey's his to lose at the moment. So good to see Nicky Jamieson back, and hopefully he can keep kicking Archie Graham on and keeping improving his performances. So, great stuff. Great stuff.
Class.
Our final game in this week's podcast took place at Galabank, where Annan Athletic and Dumbarton played out a 7-goal thriller, and the Suns emerged as 4-3 winners. They were 4 up within the hour, thanks to braces from Leighton McIntosh and Ali Roy, but they came close to chucking away. Very nervous final half hour. Max Kilsby, Aidan Smith and Tam Muir all scoring consolation goals for Annan. It was the Galabankies' first league defeat of the season. They're in 5th place with 5 points, while Dumbarton have actually made an outstanding start to the campaign. 3 wins and a draw so far, and 4th place with 5 points, and they'd be top if it wasn't for that pesky points deduction. Thoughts on this one, Shaughan?
Aye, so it's funny. So I knew Dumbarton were 4 up, and then Annan essentially started to catch them back. I hadn't read anything about the game, so I hadn't really known how the game had swayed, I suppose. I had presumed that Dumbarton were well on top, and then
slackened off.
Something had occurred, they slackened off. So the highlights last whatever they do, 9.5 minutes or whatever. Press play. It's just all Annan attacks.
Aye.
But about 3 minutes in, I think Dumbarton might take a lead about 2.5 minutes in. Even then, I think...
Yeah.
I think Dumbarton take a lead 2.5 minutes in. Even then, I think Annan have a chance that they should probably equalise from. But it just feels like it is half an hour of almost relentless Annan pressure. Then half an hour of despicable Annan defending. And then a final half hour that coincides with Dumbarton making an unusual quadruple substitution that then seems to trigger this, again, half an hour of relentless Annan pressure that almost paid off in the end. But it just looked like a brilliant game.
It did. And Fraser Clark compared it to, there's a game, sorry, all my frame of reference, everything's Stennismuir, but there was a game almost 2 years ago where Dumbarton went to Oakville View and beat Stennismuir 4-2. And the game had very, very similar to this. The game started when Stennismuir were the better team for the first 20 minutes. And then Dumbarton went through this, I think it was like a 20-minute period where every attack they had ended with a goal. You're actually dumbfounded. It's just everything they hit went in. And then the second half, obviously you've got a 4-goal lead, so you're not going to play with the same degree of intensity. But Stenny were much the better side, and on another day could have come back into it, ended up finishing 4-2. And I think this game, Fraser Clark called it like that. And watching back the highlights, I thought, yeah, that's really, really similar to them. And I suppose from this game, you saw Dumbarton at their very best in terms of some of their attacking play. The third goal in particular is really well worked. It's great stuff from Dom Docherty to sprint between the two defenders and play a nice ball over to McIntosh to finish. And as that clinical they could be in front of goal, albeit with some absolutely terrible Annan defending helping them. But then you see bad game management, trying a quadruple substitution. And you know what? See, in the circumstances, a quadruple sub when you're 4-2 up, you're probably it was only 20 minutes to go. But then you really could have chucked it away at the end. And I suppose that I know Willie Gibson, his post-match interview, Willie Gibson's never happy. I don't know if I've ever seen Willie Gibson smile. He looks like a haunted tree a lot of the time, from a ghost story.
I thought,
but he's livid. His post-match interview where he says he's absolutely livid, and yes. It's like he's absolutely livid with the defending, and I'd be the same. But I remember Gary Naismith's post-match interview after that game we were talking about from 2 years ago, and he said, the first half got him into the changing room, absolutely went through them, but the second half you've got to say to the players well done, because you listened to everything we said about it, and another day you could have done well. Gibson obviously a bit more of a glass half empty kind of guy, and was absolutely furious with the team.
But it's funny because so you're right, so that I think when he initially said, well, Willie, 4-3 defeat to Dumbarton today, what's your thoughts? And I think his first sentence is something along the lines of, I'm going to keep this brief because I'm absolutely raging. Then he talks about the defending. Obviously the second goal was kind of singled out, but then he says ultimately the defending for all the goals was as bad. Not entirely sure that's the case, but it was all pretty poor regardless. But then I thought it was a very bold question to ask him. Bear in mind, he's just spent a minute and a bit telling you how raging he is at everything, every aspect of this game. And then the interviewer goes, yeah, but overall, in terms of the performance, you must take some positives. And I was like, oh my goodness. I don't feel he's taking any positives away from this whatsoever. And he manages he almost chokes before he answers, because he's like, well, I don't see any positives. And then he manages to give some kind of generic response, but I thought it was quite a bold question.
I don't know what it is with interviewers for down that part of the country. Sandra, this boy at Annan, just asking questions to antagonise their managers. But I mean, early doors, you're absolutely in what you said. Early doors, I mean, the chances. I think they had two really good chances to score. There was one. Aidan Smith put a deflected cross in, and Tam Muir came at it, and he heads it straight at Shea Kelly, and then there's Muir again. There was
I think Gaffney put a header wide. I mean, they had. Aye. I mean, Stevie. It was funny because Stevie Farrell said post match, I thought we started the game really well, and in fairness, I suppose literally they did. As straight for centre, they whipped the ball in the box after about 5 seconds. But after that, I mean, Annan had maybe 3 half chances and at least one, probably a sitter actually for Muir before they opened the scoring. So I would have to disagree with Farrell when he said that they started the game really well.
Aye, well, they certainly settled into it. I think it's fair to say. With that, but it's the first 2 goals that are just, I mean, you can the third and fourth goals, not great defending there, but the first and second goals are really bad. I mean, I suppose this is like Leighton McIntosh's Rube Goldberg machine, where the ball goes into the box and it comes back in, but it seems to hang up in there for a long time. And you're wanting like the Zach Balfour to come out and thump it away, or you want somebody to lean into McIntosh. Don't give him the chance to jump. It's just sort of easy able to get up and nod it in.
There's probably, I suppose there's 4 elements to this goal. So it's not a very good corner. Like, it's far too deep. It goes way past the back post. And fair enough, I think it's Durnan goes in and kind of keeps it alive. Nobody gets out to him. Again, fair enough. He then hooks it back. But it's at that point, you're like, right, well, an Annan defender, or as you say, the keeper, could really do with getting on that. It's Ali Roy that kind of keeps it alive. And then again, at that point, it's like, right, well, now can a defender come and meet it? But then at that point, it's McIntosh as a good header. So there's probably 3 or 4 moments in that corner where 3 or 4 failings, I suppose, for the Annan backline within that corner.
Yeah, and great celebrations from Leighton McIntosh. Runs over to the byline, sort of goes on his backs and pretends to cycle. And Cammy Clark, who's warming up, finds it absolutely hilarious.
He really does. I didn't get it. Is it something I was missing? Or maybe it's an in-joke.
Maybe it's an in-joke. Maybe there's bicycles at the Dumbarton training complex that everyone has a shot on. I don't know. But I mean, that's a hilarious celebration, but not as hilarious as the second goal. It's just, I think, just miscommunication, really. Just a simple ball over the top. I think if Zach Balfour comes for it, he whips it out, or he comes for it and clears it, or he stays where he is and Max Kilsby can leave it. Instead, they both go for the ball, and I think it's Kilsby ends up heading it past his own goalkeeper, and it's got a tap in for Roy.
I mean, it's kind of a nothing ball, isn't it? I think it was Morgan Neal just hooks it downfield, and then Max Kilsby seems to have it under control, but Zach Balfour comes running out, and you presume that Balfour doesn't see anything. Maybe he says something very, very late, but by that point, they're essentially running into each other, and then Max Kilsby just kind of nods it past him, and then Ali Roy just taps it in. But Willie Gibson was livid, and no wonder. But I suppose when you have and maybe I'm just standing up for him, but when you have an 18-year-old goalkeeper on loan,
he can talk. He's not a mute.
I know, I appreciate that, but these are the things that could potentially happen when you have an 18-year-old goalkeeper.
You know, if it was George from Of Mice and Men that was playing in goals for Annan. Oh no, sorry, Lenny. If it was Lenny that was playing in goals, George, fine, no bother with George.
Was Lenny 18?
I don't know. I don't know, but it's somebody who's not great at communicating and expressing himself.
I know what you mean. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but I appreciate where you're coming from.
I suppose you'd be just tearing your hair out if you defend. What can you do? You know, it's that the whole idea that you set up your team, you play well, you create all these chances, you don't take them, and you chuck away 2 goals like that. I say at least make them work for them. I suppose they did do that in the second half, because the third and fourth goals were good. As you mentioned, the third goal's actually a really good team goal. It's a really nice link-up play between McIntosh and Roy, who look like they've got a fair understanding together. But McIntosh plays in Docherty, drives between 2 players, great touch to take the ball away from Josh Todd. Maybe a question that McIntosh is offside, but nevertheless, touch and finish underneath Balfour. 3-0.
Yeah, really good. So that was because there was a team goal, because it started from, I think it started for Dumbarton's right back position. So it was a really good move. But Doherty's kind of burst for midfield was probably the most impressive aspect of it. I enjoyed the fourth, but not because it was a necessarily good goal, but see when it was whipped in from the right, I think it was
Scott Tomlinson
that put it in. And there's somebody, an Annan fan, he sounds really young, and he just goes, "Oh, here we go." And he was right. He was absolutely spot on. Because Ali Roy just kind of touched it and swept it in. "Oh, here we go." Spot on.
You know, I'd have much rather heard from that Annan fan than the Screecher who was celebrating all Annan's goals. Now, you got a wee taste right at the very start.
Yes.
But my God, see the noise for the celebrations for the 3 consolation goals. It sounded like someone who was looking outside and seen their dog being stung to death by wasps and was powerless to stop it.
I mean, to be fair, by the time we got to the third goal, there was probably reasons to get excited. I'm not entirely sure I agree that you could have 3 consolation goals. But yes, maybe certainly the first one. They don't get a wee bit carried away.
I mean, in future, whoever's responsible for stewarding at Galabank, can you put the noisy people just down by the tunnel, or just as far away from the camera as possible?
Dumfries.
That's right. Can you just get them watching on a stream alone, please, in a soundproof room? But I mean, I suppose the disappointing thing for Farrell would have been the level of the comeback, because again, the goals that Annan scored, they don't necessarily have to work hard for them. I mean, for instance, I think he was particularly disappointed with the awarding of the penalty, because it's Muir is inside the box, he's going away from goal, and Durnan just gives him shoves.
Yeah,
just shoves him in. It's at that point, Max Kilsby pulled the goal back. It's 4-1. You're cruising, but then that goal there, when you come back to 4-2 and you've got this, I can't remember when the goal was scored, but you've got a wee sniff of a comeback. Folk get a wee bit nervous. You don't want one of your, I think it's your captain, doing something silly like that. So that'd be a frustrating thing. I think that it's something that Farrell says himself in the post-match interview, that for the best will in the world, Tommy Muir he's not going to do a roulette or turn or put a Rabona cross into the box or anything like that. He's going to hold up and wait for one of his mates to come out and help him out. Go with him. Force him, keep him going away. That's exactly where you want it to be going, away from goal. You don't need to be getting involved. And I think that'll be the disappointment from there. And I suppose that those subbies, when you've got that 2-goal lead, I think by taking off Roy and McIntosh, I'm not sure what the thinking was behind that, because I think they were causing all sorts of problems for the likes of Keith Watson and Josh Todd, and it can sometimes be a mistake that you make where you take off an attacker for a defensive player, but then all of a sudden you don't maybe appreciate defensively the work they're doing. If the ball goes up to them, they can hold it up and they can bring other people into the game and all that.
And especially as well when you think that both of them were on a hat-trick. So presumably both of them on a high, both of them won to complete the hat-trick. And as soon as you take, I think taking one of them off at that point, and then maybe the other one, if you want to protect them, and that's totally understandable because Dumbarton have a shallow squad. So if you want to protect both of them, fine. I'm not entirely sure taking them both off at that point was the right thing to do, because not only are you taking off 2 strikers that are full of confidence, you're taking off, I suppose, your outlet. So suddenly you're almost inviting the team onto you. And bearing in mind, we already know that Dumbarton maybe aren't as we saw, neither team were defending particularly well. I did laugh at Stevie Farrell. I can't remember if Fraser Clark actually asked him like outright, but he specifically said, nothing to do with the substitutes. Nothing to do with the substitutes. And I still, like, I did, like, I think both of us, I could be wrong, but like, I like Stevie Farrell, and I suppose he must have. Well. We must now have been discussing him for all of his time in the SPFL. So what, Stranraer 2017, maybe. Yeah. And I like listening to him, and I've liked watching his teams down the years. But there's still something I'm not entirely sure about. And I thought Saturday was a good example where everything was going well. He maybe could have managed the game a wee bit better, and I still felt he wasn't quite. Whether he should have acknowledged that, I don't know, but I felt like he was trying to say, well, no, my fault, after the game.
I did like the thumbnail for his post-match interview. If you didn't know any better, you thought he would been caught in a non-sting and is pleading his innocence. And there's Fraser Clark just reading out incriminating MSN chat logs. Now, obviously, that's not what happened. It was just a butt injury, but just know the fence. It just looked a bit. It just looked a bit. No, I'm the same man. I enjoy listening to Farrell as well. And yeah, I mean, it's easy for me to. He's not my manager. I understand that if Dumbarton fans who there's some folk who just can't take him because he's been there a long time. They just don't trust him, and it's things like this when you come close to chucking away a 4-goal lead that all feed into that. And even if you go back a couple of years, remember when they won, was it the first 7 games of the season?
Yeah.
They were absolutely cruising at the top of the table, ended up chucking it away. Even then, that fans were saying, oh, we're getting the results, but not necessarily the performances. I think this will be one of those, this is very similar to that, where ultimately, brilliant to get the 3 points, but a lot of nerves, and as Fraser in his interview, you saw all the good stuff and the bad stuff from Dumbarton, but the club Dumbarton seem like to be in a good place at the moment. They're having a far better start to the season than I would have credited them. You know, and going by the true table, they've won the most points in the in the division. Good stuff happening to them off the park. There's a lot to like about what they're doing on the park. They could be fun to watch. I mean, this looked like a really fun game. Yeah. This is think of all the games we've covered so far. This is perhaps like the most that looked like the most entertaining, with a nice ebb and flow to it. And if Annan had been a bit more ruthless, could have taken a point from it. But Dumbarton will certainly be ones to watch going forward.
I suppose what's great is we've just discussed Dumbarton there. They've won the 3 points, and everything we've discussed has just been about the 90 minutes, whereas quite often when in the last, whatever it is, 2, 3, 4 years, when we've discussed Dumbarton, we've had to caveat on something about
that's right.
the boardroom,
that's a really good point,
or something off the park or whatever. So, Saturday looked class. Fair play to them.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it's always been you've got to. Oh, what about the surface? Or there's something unpleasant has happened or something like that. But that's not the case. You can actually just talk about the match, and you can talk about it in quite a fun way. Because see if it just finished 4-0, you'd be like, right, see you later. We'll have to do a Patreon. You know, the fact that there has been that ebb and flow. These are the games that are a lot more fun. And I suppose though, from an Annan perspective, we did touch on them last week, and I don't really like talking about the same teams week after the other. But the fact that we were at one of the games last week, and then this was a really entertaining match, you kind of have to. You'd be really, if you were Gibson, you would be like absolutely like. Even more stressed than you are just now, because there against Edinburgh, you play really, really well in the first half. Like I said, like Gibson's performance there was outstanding in that match against Edinburgh, that first half performance. You play so well, but you chuck it away with a 98th minute concession, 98th minute penalty. Draw was a fair result on the day, but the fact is you come so close to winning that match and maintaining that good start to the season, you chuck away then. And here, you don't take your chances, and then you could say that Dumbarton are clinical in this game, because I think they only did have some like 4 or 5 chances and score most of them. But I mean, that second goal especially, what can you do with that? And it must be like you just must be, his blood pressure just must be through the roof.
It feels like a continuation from last season, but whereas last season their deficiencies meant that they were completely outclassed for a number of the games, whereas this season that's not the case, but they are still coming up short. So whether it's not getting the 3 points or like drawing a game, or in this occasion, losing a game that they probably should have got something from. So it's similar-ish, but I suppose a couple of things that might be positives. We thought they might struggle this season.
Yeah.
I'm starting to suspect that won't be the case. And the other thing is, Willie Gibson said afterwards that he thought he might have been able to bring in a try list for the game against Steny on the Tuesday. Now, was that the guy that scored?
Yes, there was.
I think somebody that, forgive me, I don't know his first name. His surname was Kalala. I look at like a tidy finish against Steny.
Mm-hmm. But I suppose that was a much changed Stennismuir team. I would say much changed as much as you can. You've got about 17 players you can pick from. But Steny, I wasn't down there on Tuesday night because I just think it's not a competition I'm particularly interested in, unless we get to the semi-finals, of course. But once the second goal had gone, once Ross Taylor scored that free kick, it was pretty straightforward for Steny. But I mean, there's two teams. Stennismuir are developing into a pretty good League One side, I'd say, at the moment, and current form. And there's Annan just trying to adjust to, after 2 years in League One, trying to adjust to maybe what's their natural habitat again. But again, lots of injuries, lots of bit of upheaval there.
The other thing to point out about Tuesday night's game, so I'd literally just wanted to watch his goal to see what it was like. But Annan always have kind of goal celebration music. I don't know if it's a specific song to a specific player, but they had Get Your Rocks Off by Primal Scream. So when the players are going back to the centre circle, I'm not entirely sure that we should have Bobby Gillespie screaming "Whores keep a whoring" as everybody goes back to the centre circle. It doesn't seem quite right.
Maybe he's talking about whores like football players being mercenaries, like only looking after themselves and just like trying to get a payday every year. I don't know.
What about junkies keep scoring?
Can we not just change it to something more like strikers keep on scoring? Just change it to
just don't play that song.
Oh yeah, something a bit more palatable. Up next, it's the deduction derby, Dumbarton versus Edinburgh City.
I think that Dumbarton will come a cropper. I can see Edinburgh winning this one.
The Spartans versus Annan Athletic.
Annan should probably score 5, but only score 1 and then concede 4. I think Spartans will win it.
Yeah, I think Spartans will win it. Very, very impressive. Very impressive Mark Stowe as well. I mean, what's that? Was
6
that
goals this season, maybe?
6 and 4.
Yes, something like
that. Brilliant return. And Shaughan, just a wee bonus as well, just before we finish off. If you thought we could do a lower league terrace football podcast where we didn't discuss Stennismuir, you were wrong. And if you thought we'd do a terrace Scottish football lower league podcast where we didn't discuss Edinburgh City, then you're even more wrong. Because on Wednesday morning it was announced that the club's appeal to have their 15-point deduction overturned and reduced had been rejected. I think disappointing, but not unexpected. And so the team, they're currently on -8, just 9 points behind Stranraer and Elgin City. And of course, these teams have been warned. And although very disappointing, but the club kind of knew that it wasn't likely to happen. It's just concentrating on chipping away at that deficit, getting back into a positive points difference and moving away from the foot of the table.
Yeah, I as much as I thought the punishment was harsh, as far as I was aware, I also thought it was quite black and white. So I didn't really think there was. I hoped there was an opportunity to reduce that punishment, but I wasn't necessarily expecting it. However, I would be surprised if they aren't off the bottom of the table by October or November. Just been so impressed with them so far.
Did you watch the highlights of the win over Elgin City 4-2?
Yes, I did. Looked great.
Really, really good. I mean, again, you can maybe criticise the calibre of Elgin's defending, but like Malik Zaid's goal, unbelievable. Robbie Mann's his first goal, just brilliant. And his post-match interview, I think it was Michael McIndoe, he said Robbie should be scoring hat-tricks every week. Now, see, if it was any other manager, I'd think, geez, you're off your head. But the fact it's Michael, though, I think he is off his head. But I do think there's something in there.
I was just nodding. I was like, he probably should.
Remember when it was like Mark Weir's told, you're going to keep 19 clean sheets this season. Just setting these absolutely absurd.
But he got like 16 or 17 and he was saying he was still getting a hard time.
How many goals would you have to score to get if the equivalent of a hat trick is, let's see,
You would need to be
90?
on 118 league goals.
Right, Robbie, man, the challenge has been laid down. You've got 4 so far, so better get cracking.
Just 114 to go.
You can do it. You can do it. Now, Shaughan, that'll probably do us for the time being, but we are going to record a bonus podcast, and it's basically a Fife Derby special. It's on Friday night. Shaughan was at Wraith Rovers versus Dunfermline Athletic. And on Saturday afternoon, Shaughan was at East Fife against Kelty Hearts. And if you want to hear about those 2 games, please go to our Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. It's cheap. It's just $2 a month. And for as little as that, you can access some terrific content that will keep you going until the cows come home or whatever the equivalent is in your field of work. So thank you very much, Shaughan.
Thank you.
And to you, the listener, enjoy your football, but unlike the women positioned right next to the camera at Galabank, please do so respectfully. Thank you.